Mark has been with Cambridge Social Ventures for over 5 years now, in fact, since the beginning, if memory serves, and has been instrumental in providing incredible quality business support to numerous of our ventures. I mean, I've lost track of how many have been through. I think it's about 180 or so over the last, or more, over the last 5 years, plus thousands of people who've attended the social venture weekends. And Mark has been the sort of the quiet, I'm going to say quiet workhorse, but the inspiration to many an entrepreneur social venture who's been through Cambridge Social Ventures to date. And the reason why I asked Mark to give this talk is I thought it would be useful to reflect on 5+ years experience running Cambridge Social Ventures, what we have learned, what is useful to people who are thinking of doing something similar, and also to get ideas from people of where we're going to go to next, because we are at a sort of a new stage with a new director, Nicole. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mark.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks very much. Morning, everybody here live and on Zoom. And I think Neil's intro very much sets the scene. What I'd like to do this morning is talk a bit about our journey at Cambridge Social Ventures, what we do, where we are at the moment, and the lessons that we've learned along the way. And probably just to set the scene as well, I think it's good to say that the lessons we've learned, we're offering from a humble perspective. This is what we've found. We're not saying what we've done is the only way to do it, but this is what we've learned and we want to share to help the community in terms of supporting social ventures. So what do? We create meaningful social impact by supporting entrepreneurs to explore and develop social ventures. So that's essentially all that we do. We support social ventures and we do that in a number of different ways. And that's what we're motivated by. What we're motivated by is impact at the end of the day. And that's what's central to everything that we do. Begs the question, what is a social venture? And actually, this can get a bit murky. The nomenclature in our field can be a bit vague about what are social ventures and what social ventures aren't. However, what we take as being central is the motivation and intention of the entrepreneur, what's driving them, and what's driving them, hopefully, and what's driving us is solving the wicked problems in the world. And if you want to know what they are, you can probably start with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is probably a pretty good list of wicked problems to work on. But that's what drives us, that's what drives them. And that's the kind of motivation intent that we're looking from, that the social mission is core to what they do. You know, we spend a lot of time talking to them about their business and how to develop their business and the revenue engine that's going to drive their social venture. But the reason they're doing that has got to be to have an impact. One or two things we insist on as a minimum, just as a way of qualifying the people that we work with. And that is that they embed their social mission in their legal structure. So we work with ventures across a number of different legal structures. Some of which we talked during the lectures yesterday are companies limited by shares, which a lot of people think of as normal standard companies. But in that case, what we want the entrepreneurs to do is to embed their social mission and ideally lock that into their company documentation. And also be serious about measuring social impact. So, you know, it's no good just talking the talk. You've actually got to have a theory of change, a strategy for measuring your impact, and measure that and put that in the public domain as well. So you'll note that a lot of our ventures have got a page on their website where they talk about their impact and they share it with people. So that's really important. Other than that, the ventures that we have on our program are a broad church, by which I mean there's a huge amount of variety in terms of the fields that they work in terms of the stage that they're at, whether they're pre-revenue, or we've had everything up to county council, local government departments stepping out of local government control to become mutuals. We take ventures sometimes at the ideation stage, but very rarely. But generally, it's a very broad church. So we've got everything from genomics to bionics, and I'll talk a bit about that later, to human milk banking. And the latest story in the press about one of our ventures was about a venture called Citizen Zoo, who just announced they're releasing a rare variety of grasshopper into the wild in Cambridgeshire that had been bred by citizen zookeepers at home, which is fantastic. I mean, it's great, but it just goes to show that the vast variety of ventures and stages and fields that they're working in, the ventures that we work with. And that's one of the great joys of what we do. Frankly, my background is in technology, and I spent 25, 30 years working in technology. And now it's fantastic to be working with citizen zookeepers and human milk banks and genomics companies and everything in between. So how are we doing? Here's one or two numbers that I pulled out and wanted to share with you. There are other stats, but this is an interesting place to start. So I'll talk some more about it, but one of the key things that we do is an event called Social Venture Weekend, or we did in pre-COVID times. Now we've replaced it with online, online outreach events. But this has been very much a pillar of what we do. So we've had over 1,000 entrepreneurs through Social Venture Weekend, which is a 3-day training course here at the Judge Business School, probably more like 1,200 or something like that. Neil made a stab at the number of entrepreneurs we've had through our 12-month-long incubator program, and that's about 200-ish. And we're actually selecting the latest cohort at the moment for the autumn start. And if anybody knows of anybody who wants to apply, then send them along. Have a look at our website and apply. 70 million plus is the amount of money that our ventures have raised in terms of equity loans, grants, public sector contracts, exits. And the reason I share that number is that that's not what we're aiming for. We're not aiming for large investment numbers. We're aiming for the impact. However, it does show that social entrepreneurship now is becoming mainstream, and it also shows that how seriously people are taking this now, in terms of putting money into it, and in terms of supporting those ventures. So that's a really interesting number. As I say, that's not something we're focusing on or targeting, but it's pretty amazing. 66% of our ventures that are still trading, revenue generating, or profitable. Also, we did an impact report for the Social Venture Weekend event that we do. And one stat out of that is that 80% of the attendees at Social Venture Weekend, 2 years after the event, are still working on their social venture. And 75% have actually moved the social venture onto a development stage where actually it is a real startup, and they're trying to raise money, they're trying to pull together a team and do all those things, which is really amazing, given that actually Social Venture Weekend is an open event, and other than the fact that the people come along to it are motivated with that social intent, there's very little qualification on our part that we're trying to look for red hot startups or anything like that. So the fact that 2 years later, 75% are actively working on their social venture is an amazing statistic. I'll talk some more about impact and our impact later, but it's really difficult for us to aggregate the impact that we have. And the reason is that our ventures work in such diverse fields. So, how can you add the impact of reintroducing grasshoppers to saving the lives of neonatal babies through human milk banking, to something else. But we can pick out one or two interesting impact points and share them from our ventures. So one of our ventures is Thrift Plus, and they're working in the circular economy, essentially kind of like an online charity shop where if you've got quality clothes, you can send them to Thrift Plus, and Thrift Plus will sell them on your behalf. Some of the money goes to charity, some goes to Thrift Plus. And they've raised so far £1 million in just terms of charitable donations. And I think the last time I looked, they had something like 250,000 items of clothing in their warehouse, which was clothing that would otherwise either be sat in wardrobes doing nothing, or in landfill, or languishing at the back of a charity shop on a high street. Another interesting statistic from one of our ventures is a venture called BB Wraps, who make organic cotton, beeswax, and plant-based wraps to replace shrink wrap that we use with food. And when I last looked, they had saved essentially 25 million pieces of plastic shrink wrap going into the environment. And I could quote more of these little point impacts, but that's the kind of, those are the kind of areas that our ventures are working in, and the kind of impacts that they're having. When we first started, it's difficult to measure impact generally with incubator programs, but actually there's been a lot of research, and that's improved over time. What we theorize is that the ventures that we work with need probably more support and help, and over a longer period than a lot of typical startups, because they've got that double bottom line of social impact and having to have a commercial model as well. So that's how we're doing. Bit of history and context of how we got to where we are. So originally, Neil said that I've been working for Cambridge Social Ventures for 5 years, which is absolutely true. But I also worked for 2 years before with an organisation called Social Incubator East. And Social Incubator East came out of the UK Government Cabinet Office. So it's a government initiative. And at the time, they wanted to put more money into social innovation. And there were a number of stakeholder partners at the beginning, including the business school here, Keystone Trust, which is an organisation that Neil used to run, ALIA, which is a Cambridge charity, and Foundation East, which was an investment fund in startups and social ventures. So that funded the first 2 years of our work. And to be honest, when we started, we were kind of starting from scratch and inventing it as we went along. And I'll tell you some of the challenges that we had along the way. But when that funding came to an end from the Cabinet Office, at that point, Neil and Paul had already been setting up the Centre for Social Innovation at the Judge Business School, and that was a natural home for us. So when that piece came to an end, we became part of the business school, which is where we are now. And where we sit in the Centre for Social Innovation is as part of what we refer to as the think, teach, and do cycle. So think is the research that goes on here. So there are PhD candidates and postdoctoral researchers researching into social innovation. Teaching is what we're doing this week. So for the external guest to this lecture, we've actually got a residential week going on this week, and all the people in the audience here are students on our Masters in Social Innovation course. So that's the teaching part of what we do. And Cambridge Social Ventures is the engagement part, or what we always say, the do part at the bottom of the pie chart there. So we're about incubating social ventures and supporting social innovation here and across the university. So that's where we fit into this. I'm going to talk about this some more towards the end because it's quite important, or has become quite important. So what's our business model? Well, our business model at the moment is to take money from a philanthropic donor, which is very nice, and it has worked very well for us. It's allowed us a great deal of freedom to innovate, and it's allowed us to focus on the impact and the entrepreneurs. and not making money, essentially. But obviously, it's got its pros and cons in terms of sustainability in the long run. So we're actually in the process at the moment of reviewing future options for revenue and further philanthropy. We need to do that to make sure that what we do in the future is sustainable and can be done in an ongoing fashion. We do charge for our programs, but when I say we charge for our programs, we're talking a minimal amount. So Social Venture Weekend, I think, is something like £75 for a 3 days training at Cambridge University Business School. And I think we charge our entrepreneurs £100 when they come onto our 12-month incubator program. And really the reason that we do this is just to keep people serious and make sure people attend. Because you probably appreciate if you run free events, quite often only about half the people turn up. So there is a modest charge, but actually in no way representative of the cost or value of what we do. It's probably worth talking a bit about taking equity, which is something that we've considered. So taking equity means taking a stake, taking shares in the ventures that we work with. And it's something that we looked at. We decided that it isn't something that works for us for a number of reasons. One is that you need the right kind of legal structure to get equity investment. And we talked about this in one of the teaching sessions yesterday. But you need a legal structure that's got shares to be able to do that. And not all of our ventures have got that legal structure, and nor will they have that. They may be companies limited by guarantee. They may be community interest companies limited by guarantee. There may be charities. Actually, we work with relatively few charities, but they might have legal structures that aren't amenable to equity investment. We also think that it's a long time to potentially get a return on that. You've got to wait until there's an exit, which might be 5-10 years down the line. It's very unpredictable. Obviously, the nature of equity investment, angel investment, and things like that is that it's high risk. So it's something that we can't rely on. Frankly, it's something difficult for us to do in the university structure where we are here, which is quite unique. So it's something that's difficult for us to set up like that. And finally, the feedback that we've had from one or two ventures on our program is that they prefer the relationship that we have with them, because we've got no agenda other than helping them increase their impact and be successful. And obviously, if we took an equity stake in them, then we become an investor. And the feedback that we've had is that can subtly alter the relationship. But obviously, that might work for other programs, and that's fine. So that's our business model. To tell you a bit about the programs that we run, Social Venture Weekend in non-COVID times is a mainstay of what we do. We run it 3 times a year, 50 people at each event. I remember when we did the first one, and when it came to the second one, we wondered whether anybody would attend it, because we thought after we'd had 50, 60 people attend the first one, we'd probably got all the people who are interested in doing social venturing. So we were quite windy when it came to the second Social Venture Weekend. But even more people wanted to go to that. And so far we've run, I think, 19 Social Venture Weekends, 18 or 19, that kind of order of magnitude. And outside of COVID, the demand remains undiminished. 3 days of training for early stage social entrepreneurs. We do things like regular business stuff like business model canvas, finance, marketing, sales, pitching. Generally, pitching is something that we do during that training there, but we don't spend a lot of time on pitching. What we do, we think, is kind of qualitatively different from a lot of accelerator programs where it's pitch, and then finish after 3 months. So we don't actually spend an awful lot of time on pitching. And we spend a lot of time doing things like governance and legal structures, which is the stuff that is important for social ventures, and it's important about locking in your legacy. to make sure that you don't set off with a social mission in mind and then maybe get acquired down the road and lose your way, or the social mission gets diluted. We also run our 12-month incubator program, the one that I mentioned we're recruiting for at the moment. 2 intakes a year, 10 to 16 cohorts, ventures per cohort. So the two cohorts overlap each other. We've always got 2 going at any time. And when I say 10 to 16, we're not trying to fill a specific number of places. It really all is about how good the fit is, whether we think we can help them, whether it's the right time for them. So we may have a cohort as small as 10, and we may have one as big as 16. What do they get? They get business advice, and we think that's quite important. They get monthly training, so we run training events. Some of those we run ourselves, some we run with our colleagues at the Judge. Some we have a cloud of associates where we bring in external experts to help them. There's a lot of peer-to-peer support, and this is one of the shames about COVID times. It's hard to replicate that, but we really think that being part of a peer group is a key part of being on this kind of program. So yeah, that's really important. Office space, they get office space when we're non-COVID times again. Spend a lot of time doing networks and introductions, and that is really important. And some of that's into the Cambridge ecosystem, startup ecosystem. Some of that's investors. Some of that's into the social innovation, social entrepreneurship ecosystem, and some of that is me and one or two of my colleagues have been around for quite a while, and we've got our own long list of contacts that we can help people with, and access to finance, which might be through investors, grants, etc. So that's the 2 kind of core programs that we've been running. More recently, we've been running a thing called the Cambridge Social Innovation Prize in conjunction with the Trinity Hall. And this is for more advanced social entrepreneurs, typically scale-ups. And it's all around the founding entrepreneur and helping them develop their skills and develop as a person. And a lot of the people we work with, their ventures are going through change because they're growing and changing. We do that once a year. There are 4 winners, and we have just selected our 3rd cohort of winners, but I can't tell you who they are because no announcements have been made yet. And they get 12 months one-to-one support with us, and also they get £10,000 for each winner. So this is us moving from working with, working in the startup to scale up kind of phase to working with scale-ups and larger organizations going through change. We also run an entry-level event, which used to be called So You Want to Be a Social Entrepreneur, and we ran that from time to time. And really the reason we did that was for people who couldn't get to Social Venture Weekend, because for a lot of people who either on limited income because of the travel and accommodation, or for people who got caring duties and couldn't spend 3 days in Cambridge, we wanted to do an outreach event as a roadshow. So we did that. We've done several of those. We don't run them on a regular basis, but from time to time. And a lot of those are supporting people who are community organizers, community initiatives. And that's been really interesting. And that's fed into what we've been doing in COVID times. So incubator program now has continued business as usual, but online. So actually, in terms of the number of ventures on our program, pretty much consistent, and we've continued with business as usual. It's amazing how resilient the ventures are that we've been working with. Training and business advice is all online. When we do the incubator program, when we do it live, we normally do a 3-day kickoff training event to kind of get things going. What we found is that having 3 days solid of training on Zoom is really hard to do. So what we've done is split that into 6 half-day sessions. Similar cohorts and size. It's not ideal. Some aspects of it work well. I think building that cohort, esprit de corps, the peer group interaction is really difficult online. We've had virtual pub meetings, we've had virtual coffee meetings, and it's tricky. However, there are potential upsides, which mean that obviously we could extend the reach of what we do. Previously, people had to get to Cambridge 1 day a month to do training. And now that we're online, that's no longer the case. So we have to put some thought in the future into how we manage that, and whether there's an opportunity to do a blended event like this, where some of the people are in the audience and some of the people are on Zoom. So we shall see. And the workshop outreach event that we did, the short one, has now become getting started with your social enterprise. So this, to a certain extent, replaces Social Venture Weekend. We're doing it every month or two, up to about 20 attendees per session. Half-day workshop online, that's meant to say, for those who can't do a 3-day course. And as I say, that's really, that's been really good. The feedback that we've had is good. That event has fed into our incubator program. So people who've gone along to do that half-day training have come onto our incubator program, and that's been very gratifying. And we're not actually doing it overtly as a funnel into our incubator program, but both Social Venture Weekend and our online activities have actually done that. So let's talk a bit about the interesting bit, which is lessons that we've learnt along the way. And I think I'll go back to my opening comments, which is this is our experience, given our circumstances, given our funding model, given the reach that we've got, and what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, and what we found. So it's maybe not the only way to do it. When we first started doing this, the evidence of the success of incubation programs was quite sketchy. And to a certain extent, we were working on subjective feedback that we'd helped entrepreneurs. They felt that we'd made a huge difference, that they wouldn't still be there if they hadn't been on the program. But nowadays, if you want to search online, there is quite a lot of quantitative evidence about the success of incubator programs. So we're going to talk about things like person-centered risks for the issues for the first-time social entrepreneur, practical delivery, calling it a day if things don't work out, what's happened there, spotting winners. I actually put, when we've done this presentation before, but I actually put in this segment because I thought it's a question that people are bound to ask, which is, how do you know if somebody's going to be a winner? So we'll talk about that a bit as well. So let's talk about the lessons learned. Oh, and finally, importantly, Think, Teach, Do really works, which is our integration into the Centre for Social Innovation. So, person-centered risks. First one probably is team disintegration. And we wrote a report when we only about a year into the program, the Cambridge Social Ventures or Social Incubator East program. And one thing we found at that point was that behind every business, behind every venture is a person or people. And it's often the people issues that are the limiting factor. And this is one of the reasons why we try to adopt this kind of whole person approach, where we are supporting entrepreneurs over a long period of time, and we're doing it in a bespoke fashion for the individual and what they need. Over time, sometimes people have stopped for reasons outside of their control, so bereavement and things like that. Teams that have recently formed, we found, are at high risk of disintegration It's because they don't know each other very well, and they've yet to get into a kind of modus operandi working together, and maybe their characters don't gel. But we've also found that long-standing relationships and even long-standing friendships between founders can fragment under the stress of doing a startup. And I can think of at least 2 or 3 cases where we've spent our time mediating between founders to try and get them try and save the venture from disintegrating. Sometimes with success, sometimes without. So that's one person-centered risk, which is team disintegration. A second one is that of solopreneurs. Sometimes they talk about solopreneurs or sole entrepreneurs or lone founders. But this can be really tricky. Unlike many programs, we've always supported and felt that having a solo entrepreneur can work. So, having a team can be powerful, but, ever since the beginning, we've had solo entrepreneurs as part of the mix. In that case, it's very important that they get support around them. And one of the things that we do at the end of the program is we have a checklist, and we need those entrepreneurs to have a support system around them by the time they get to the end. It's also possible to have a hero entrepreneur. A lot of the people that we work with have lived experience, the social problem they're trying to solve, which means they can be very motivated. And that means that they can work too long, they can, they can work crazy hours, and they can burn out. So actually, we spent a lot of time working with ventures around resilience and arranging training around resilience. Inability to step back for 2 reasons. One is that they're so motivated by the mission they can't. And secondly, sometimes because they need to step back because actually they've lost perspective. Personal resilience I talked about, but it is really important. It's really important, personal resilience. Doing a startup can be very stressful. Doing a social startup can be even more stressful because you've got that double bottom line, and you may have lived experience of the issue that you're trying to solve, which can, can make things, very, very focused. So yeah, personal resilience important. Also, once or twice we've had issues around insufficient trust and openness. And this could be, for instance, a venture who's got a poor personal credit history and doesn't feel they can share that with us. And obviously that then impacts when they get introduced to investors. It could be mental health issues that we could help with or work around, but we don't find out until the person's leaving the program. So those are risk factors as well. That somebody doesn't share something with us which actually would have been useful to know and would have helped to support them. And obviously health and relationship problems as well. First-time social entrepreneur issues, they don't always have realistic expectations or know what they don't know. So yeah, sometimes people think that because they've had a bit of interest in putting some funding into them, talk to somebody who's expressed an interest about an equity investment, then everything's great. And they've dropped into the mindset of thinking they're a Silicon Valley startup and they're going to go through funding rounds and things like that. And that may not be the case, and they may not be ready to take that on, or that might not actually be the funding that the funding that's suitable for them. So yeah, unrealistic expectations can feed into this issue, particularly around funding, because people don't know what they don't know, and they think that all they have to do is write a pitch deck and spam it out to 50 investors, and the money will come flowing in, or do a quick crowdfunding campaign and a viral video of them doing something, and the money will come in. Linked to this is the fact that sometimes it's possible to overestimate people's knowledge. And I think this is where our training comes in, of having a baseline of training that we think is kind of the core competencies and core kit for somebody to go out there and do a social venture. Because talking to people one-to-one, quite often people talk the talk, but actually what they do know is a mile wide and an inch deep. So that's something that we found. Cannot overestimate their knowledge. We've also found that we have to be very careful about what we say, because what we say can be influential. And I always think it's good to offer up ideas for consideration rather than actually telling somebody what to do. We've had situations where we've made throwaway remarks leaving a meeting, a joke basically leaving a meeting, and later found that an entrepreneur has kind of focused on that as something that they've got to do, and it's risen up their priority list. Something that was, as I say, was never our intention. So you've got to be really careful about how you position advice that you give, how you position advice to people and give information. One of the other issues with first-time entrepreneurs is they can't get honest feedback. This is because all their friends and family think they're geniuses and want to be supportive. And if you talk to friends and family, you're in an echo chamber where everybody's saying how great everything is. And hopefully this is something that we try and help with by providing a safe space where people can get constructive criticism without actually being undermined or given unrealistic expectations. So that's really important, we think. And in the teaching session yesterday, we were talking about the importance of getting a first order from a customer as actually proof that what you're doing works. Because feedback's great, but it only takes you so far. So some thoughts about and the need for a long-term relationship. I think I mentioned that, but social entrepreneurs, double bottom line, need a lot of support, very stressful. And we think a short 3-month program probably isn't long enough. A lot of the ventures we work with are what I call people businesses, so working in things like mental health interventions. They're not software startups trying to get an MVP, minimum viable product, out the door within 3 months. So some practicalities of delivery. We use business advisors, not mentors. So the business advisors we use are paid and on the staff. They're not volunteer mentors. And we think this brings stability and continual improvement. And we've been fortunate with our funding model from philanthropic donation that we've been able to pursue that, of having professional business advisors. We meet with them at least on a monthly basis, provide a bespoke service, at the most basic, help hold them to an account, and help them focus on strategy when they're getting snowed under with day-to-day stuff. So we think that's really important. We monitor ventures as they go along, and as a team we discuss how we can help them between each other and in a collegiate fashion, and that's really quite powerful. We're also backed up by a cloud of associates. So over the last 7 years, we have got a large number of experts in a whole bunch of different fields that we can pull on when we do need domain-specific advice or support. So yeah, that's been quite important as well, and that's built up over the last 7 years. Physical office space outside of COVID times. Only some of our ventures have been able to use that because they can physically get to Cambridge, but it's been very helpful because people often talk about these water cooler conversations where you can bump into people and have informal conversations. And also ventures, if they come and work in the office, then they're going to spend time with us as well, so they can kick ideas around with us. So that has been quite important, and I assume in post-COVID times, that's going to continue to be important. Peer-to-peer interaction, I talked about that. Being part of a peer group is really, really very powerful. And we always say that everybody on the program, the incubator program, is an expert at something. Everybody is an expert at something, and bringing together that 10 to 16 people who are all experts to work together has worked very well. Also, for the geeks amongst you, we've used a communications tool called Slack, which probably most of you are familiar with, and we've used that since the very beginning. All of our ventures, even when they leave the program, stay on Slack, which means that we've built up a large database of information, advice, discussions, which all of our entrepreneurs have got access to. And in the long run, that's proven to be extremely useful. Also, practicalities of delivery. We work with a lot of international ventures. Pre-COVID, they had to have some kind of UK presence to be able to get to Cambridge for training, but they may actually be delivering well, we've had ventures, across Africa, South America, Central America, and Asia. Post-COVID, maybe we'll be able to do more work with international ventures. So calling it a day, how and why ventures leave. Not all ventures are still with us after 12 months. We think we have a duty not to waste our time and waste the time of other ventures on the program if we think something's not going to work. And sometimes we have to actually persuade people to try and stop because they've been trying something for a long while and it's not working, and they just can't let go of it. So we actually spend some time trying to persuade people to stop. Occasionally, we have to ask them to go for various reasons. So sometimes we ask them to stop and they still want to continue. Sometimes we persuade them not to continue. Sometimes they ask to depart because whatever reasons, personal reasons, that could be that personal monetary reasons or family reasons or something like that. Sometimes it's because the team's collapsed. Sometimes the business has pivoted to not really be social anymore, and that social bit's really important to us. And sometimes it's because for whatever reason they're not willing to be open with us and share the information we need to help them progress. So we can cancel our support at any time. In reality, probably out of a cohort of 12 ventures, only a couple will drop out during the course of the program. So the dropout rate actually is pretty low. But we feel seriously that we have a responsibility not to maintain support if we think it's misleading people that they're going to be successful when we don't think they are. And if they leave the program and they continue, they are successful, then great, that's fantastic, good for them. I think I've said that, and it can be hard to get people to stop. On spotting winners, so this is subjective, this slide, but it's something I thought I was bound to get asked. So I spoke to one of my fellow business advisors, Karen Anderson, and agreed that spotting winners is hard. It's really hard to do. If it was easy, every angel investor would just make millions and billions on every investment they made. It is really hard to spot winners. That's the nature of innovation. The nature of innovation is people are doing new things, so it's hard to predict. So it's hard. Spotting warning signs is easier. So if somebody is likely to have a problem, then spotting a warning sign, that is really quite straightforward, and often that's part of our duty to talk to ventures and and warn them of the signs that we've seen, that things may not work. Likely success factors. I think a likely success factor with some of the most successful ventures I've seen is they're led by a monomaniac on a mission. So a monomaniac is somebody who's completely single-minded and they're on a mission to do something. And when you meet somebody like that, generally it's quite obvious because all they want to talk about is the mission that they're on. And it can get slightly boring because all they want to talk about is the mission that they're on. But monomaniacs on a mission tend to be a success characteristic, I think, for successful social ventures. This is one I particularly like, a hustler. And to me, being a hustler, I think, is a really positive thing. But in business school speak, we might talk about a bias to action, which means that they will make something happen. So if nothing is happening, they will make something happen. They'll pick up the phone, they'll go and visit somebody, or get in front of somebody, but they will not sit there just strategizing. They'll go out there, hustle, and make something happen. And once again, when you meet people like that and ask them about the process they've been through about starting their venture, it can be quite obvious that they have that characteristic. Remorseless, absolutely remorseless. Successful entrepreneurs, the ones that we've come across that have shown the most growth, the most impact, are fearsomely remorseless and single-minded. And this probably ties in what I was saying before, is sometimes trying to persuade people to stop when we don't think it's working, because some people will just carry on regardless. But often that works. And I can think of, number of ventures where the entrepreneur has been dedicated beyond belief. They've normally got a good grip on the numbers. So they don't have to be accountants, they don't have to be finance people, but most successful entrepreneurs, if you ask them what their break-even point is, or how much money they've got in the bank, or what sales they're expecting in the next month, they will know. So they've got a handle on the numbers. As I say, don't have to be finance experts, don't need to understand everything, don't need to be an accountant, but they know where they are, they know the resources they've got, and it's at their fingertips and in their head. And also a willingness to seek and take advice. So I thought there's a really interesting study, if you want to look it up, in the Journal of Business Venturing Insights. And they found that narcissism is associated with entrepreneurial intention, but not business success. So I really love that. Entrepreneurial intention, but not business success. So people who think they know it all and don't want to take advice are probably not going to be successful. Having said that, the successful entrepreneurs we work with are selective about the advice they take. They've got a limited amount of time, so they have gaps in their advice and gaps in their knowledge, and they will go out and seek the advice that they want. So they're selective, but they are completely open-minded about getting advice. So that's something on spotting winners. And the final learning is, at the very beginning, I talked about think, teach, and do really working. So you remember the pie chart. What we found is that practice contributes to research. What we do contributes to research in the Centre for Social Innovation. And we've had several research studies on the work that we're doing. We found that research informed practice and teaching. So what Neil and Paul and the academic teams and academics in the centre are doing helps inform us and helps us develop what we do with practitioners. And finally, students contribute to incubator ventures. So I think students on this program and also on MBA programs here in the business school have electives where they work with enterprises. And we've had some very successful projects come out of that with students working with our ventures. So I can see Neil hovering in the wings. Shall I continue? I'll continue a bit. Yeah. I can still Neil hovering, waiting to ask some questions. and links to the university ecosystem are invaluable. So that is very much true. And we're fortunate being in a place like Cambridge here. We often say to ventures that there's probably a world expert on whatever issue they're trying to solve within half a mile of where we are. And that's certainly been true. So one more slide maybe on our early challenges. Getting people to know about what we're on about was really hard in the early days. Social entrepreneurship was something that we spent a lot of time talking to investors about and helping them understand, and also talking to people in the startup ecosystem. And it was seen as something that was non-mainstream and esoteric. Over time, that has changed. And now most investors know about social ventures, they know about impact ventures, and they realize that businesses now are on a spectrum, and are more amenable to investing in different types of businesses. But in our early days, we had to do quite a bit of education around that. Early challenges. Working in an 800-year-old institution would have its challenges. It has, and it has, but I think since we've been part of the centre, we've overcome some of those. Social entrepreneurship in a business school was disruptive, probably, initially, and seen as a non-mainstream thing. However, we think it is now an integral part of the work here. I noticed as I came in on a bicycle this morning, there were banners outside the business school saying "Changing the World." And also I noticed on our website that the top story on the Judge Business School website was Neil talking about cooperatives and the cooperative approach. We've also found that having a wide variety of ventures had disadvantages in the early days, because that meant that we had limited domain knowledge. But over time, as we've accumulated our cloud of associates, and also we've gained personal experience of different fields, then we've filled in that domain knowledge. And 200 ventures in 7 years, that's filled in those gaps. And finally, even people like us couldn't stop it being messy. Working with social entrepreneurs who are got the double bottom lines, who are trying to solve complex social problems, is always going to be messy, and it's always going to be about people working with people. It's never going to be formulaic. And I think that's something that's probably not changed since the early days. The nature of what we do is very much bespoke, and continues to evolve like that.